What's going on, guys? In the works, and today we're going to be taking a look at the FAMAS, one of the weapons I actually enjoyed using quite a bit in Battlefield 3, but it returns here in Battlefield 4, and how good is this weapon actually? Well, after we jump into the bomber here, because if I see it, if I see people not in the bomber, I have this desire that I have to jump in there, because there's nothing more frustrating than controlling a point and seeing the other team up in the sky in your bomber. You should never, ever, ever let that happen. But the FAMAS is actually a weapon that my buddy Snoov likes quite a bit. And since I personally hadn't used it a lot since I unlocked it when the game first came out, I decided to give it a whirl. And I'm going to talk about some of the things that I've learned about it, how it compares to the other weapons in the game, and whether or not I actually think it's practical. Because, like I said, in Battlefield 3, it was a pretty solid option. Even after they nerfed the magazine down to 25, which is still like that in Battlefield 4, which is kind of a bummer. But it's DICE's way of balancing out the high fire rate, high damage that the FAMAS has, because typically you don't see a lot of 1000 RPM assault rifles that do 25 damage, so that means that it's going to have a very, very quick time to kill. And if you ever used the FAMAS back when it first released in Karkan during Battlefield 3, you'll know this thing was an absolute shredder. It would tear through people very, very quickly. Well, how does it compare here in Battlefield 4? Because we have a different assortment of weapons at our disposal. We've got the all-purpose kit weapons now, which are basically assault rifles. We've got the engineers with the PDWs like the CZ3, which shoots 1000 RPMs, just like the FAMAS. So where does that leave the FAMAS? Is it worth using over some of those other weapons? Well, yes and no. The great thing about the FAMAS is it is a full-fledged assault rifle. It will hold its damage the same length as the most assault rifles in the game. The other advantage is it is a bullpup weapon, which means that you will get the typical bonus of better hip fire and better handling. But that's really where it stops for the FAMAS. The fact that it is gimped by a 25 round magazine, I think actually hurts it, and it still has the really, really slow reload. That's pretty typical of bullpup rifles, but it's enough to make the FAMAS seem like it's maybe not worth using. Now, don't get me wrong, it is a good rifle. I just think that in comparison to the amount of other rifles that are in the game, you've got the L85 now, you've got the CZ3A1, the AEK is really good, you've got the F2000 on the way, you've got the A91. There's a lot of high fire rate rifles out there that I think do it a little bit better than the FAMAS. Now, the FAMAS is at the top of the ladder when it comes to rate of fire. There's no doubt about that. But when you look at some of the other stats on it, that's where you start to see some discrepancies, and that's where I don't think it's as useful as it was in BF3. Because in BF3, even after the nerf, I still considered it hands down the best close quarters weapon. And that was just because it handled so well, it had the good hip fire. The reload wasn't a huge issue if you were smart about the way you controlled your burst. So that made the FAMAS a very attractive option. But with all the other new guns here in Battlefield 4, it makes it really hard to choose the FAMAS. That being said, if you want a weapon that is just pure fire rate, that is really good at taking down 2 people, maybe 3 if you're very, very accurate, the FAMAS is probably your go-to gun. Now, I've tried this out with a bunch of different attachments at this point. Right now, I'm using muzzle brake with the ergo grip and the laser sight. I've tried it with a couple different combinations to see which one I like the best. I know Snoov says that he really enjoys the using the suppressor on it. He says that really helps you out because it makes it almost have no recoil. And that's one of the things that I think draws a lot of people away from the FAMAS is the recoil patterns. It's basically straight up. It's pretty similar to the BF3 version. It's pretty pronounced recoil. So I slap a muzzle brake on there to kind of counter that to see if it'll help me be a little bit more accurate and close. But the muzzle brake does penalize you in terms of accuracy at range. And a lot of people don't like to sacrifice that. They look at that particular negative and they're like, well, I don't want to be in a situation where I'm at a disadvantage at longer ranges. But if you're using the FAMAS how it's meant to be used, which is up close to maybe medium range, that's really not going to be that big of an issue. You're better off focusing on attachments that are going to help you with the recoil control, making it a more stable weapon. Angle grip is another good attachment to use in tandem with muzzle brake. I've ran that with the AEK and had really good results because it does help the initial recoil, the stability of it. If you don't plan on aiming down sight and you plan on hip firing, it's probably not the best choice. But if you're playing really aggressive with like the AEK or the FAMAS, the high fire rate, high kick weapons, muzzle brake and the angle grip really helps the control of the weapon if you're just aiming down sight. And I've tried to get away from hip fire a lot just because I think that in Battlefield 4 it's not as useful as it was in Battlefield 3. you could still do really well with it, don't get me wrong, but it definitely isn't as powerful as it was. So I tend to aim down sight a lot more. And those two attachments in tandem really help bring down the kick of these high fire rate weapons. So I highly suggest you try out the FAMAS if you haven't. Figure out whether or not it's going to suit your playstyle. It kills people super quick, but there's a lot of negatives that will impact you, I think, in a way that will kind of steer you away towards some of the other weapons like the L85, the ACWR, some of the other high fire rate weapons that are a little bit more beneficial in other areas, not just the fire rate, a little bit more balanced, because the FAMAS is all about fire rate. It really doesn't do anything else well, but it does kill people super quick. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. If you missed one of my past videos, here is a chance to catch up, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.